Ethanol blending of petrol is making national headlines. People from all walks of life and from different parts of the country have been expressing displeasure as well as a lot of confusion regarding what this ethanol blending can do to their vehicles. As candidates for civil services, it is important for us to know what this ethanol blending is, how it is done, what are the processes involved, and also at the same time understand what are the government policy measures associated with these biofuels, the different generation of biofuels, and their overall benefit and role in terms of India's climate commitments as well as in terms of our fiscal space. Hello and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to this session where we are going to talk in greater detail about the ethanol blending program. Now, if you have opened up the newspaper or browsed through social media channels in the past few days, you would have come across various different types of anger related videos and also a lot of confusion which is spread around the ethanol, which is blended with the petroleum. So, what is it? Basically people are getting confused whether that ethanol is going to destroy or damage their vehicles permanently, what is happening to the mileage, and also is it something which is only happening in our country? Is India a test case where this particular formula is being used for the first time and nowhere else across the world is it being used? So first of all, what do we understand when we talk about ethanol? So, ethanol is a hydrocarbon, that is, a compound of carbon and hydrogen. The combustion of this hydrocarbon produces energy. So, basically, the ethanol is represented by the carbon structure of hydrogen and OH. So, overall, this ethanol can be produced as a consequence of fermentation process. Now, it is one of the ways to produce ethanol. And by fermenting, let's suppose any of the food stocks, for example, in India, the ethanol which is being produced right now is produced from the case of the surplus production of rice, maize, etc. Now, here, if you take these grains and you carry out the fermentation, there you get the production of ethanol. But that is not directly put into your petrol mixture. It is then distilled, purified, and then eventually blended with petrol in a particular mixture. Now, this is not something which has started just now. You would have come across the numbers E5, E10, E20, E30, and so on. The initiation of this ethanol blending program was started at the turn of the century in the early 2000s. It started with the E5 fuel. Now, this E5 fuel basically meant 5% ethanol and 95% petroleum. That is something which was introduced in the early 2000s. And the purpose of it was very simple, that when you burn only petroleum, for example, it produces lot of unburnt hydrocarbons, black carbon, various different nitrous oxides, and other large amount of greenhouse gases. However, if you mix ethanol into that mixture, then the amount of pollutants which are produced are comparatively less from the vehicles. A country like India, which in various different cities has the vehicular emission accounting for a major proportion of the air pollutants, this is a way forward which was thought to be a progressive step way back in the 2000s. Now, at that point of time itself, India set itself a goal that eventually we are going to achieve the blended program of E10, that is 10% of ethanol and 90% of petroleum. And that mixture will be used as fuel. Now, the target date was set to be in the 2020s and it was achieved. Now, India has set the target for E20, and the target is to be implemented across India for significant cut in emissions and also will boost the rural economy and the rural income, because There were global examples like the case of Brazil. Now, Brazil, just like India, is one of the very large producers of sugarcane in the world. Brazil and India, they are the number one and the number two producers of sugarcane in the world. Now, sugarcane is used to produce sugar, jaggery, khanchari, molasses, bagasse. These are some of the byproducts of sugarcane. Now, not all of these byproducts are of great use. So the farmers, they end up throwing that or wasting that byproduct. Now, using that byproduct to manufacture ethanol was seen by Brazil as a way to augment the farm income. India also came up with this idea, and that is where India also started to promote this ethanol blending program. And mind you, why it became more important in a country like India and not in a country like Saudi Arabia or UAE was because we are energy dependent. We are not energy independent country. We import fuel from abroad. And at the time of the Iran war, the crisis further emphasized the utility of energy independence that a country needs to achieve. A country needs to be energy independent in order to withstand the various different types of strategic pressures abroad. Now, ethanol, if you mix it with petroleum, then your overall import bill will reduce and you will end up saving substantial amount of foreign exchange reserves as well. So there goes the logic of improvement in the fiscal space of the economy, boosting the rural income, reduction of greenhouse gases. So these are some of the benefits. But then, what has been making news headlines in the recent times? That lot of vehicles, they have been facing issues in terms of reduction of mileage. There has been a lot of misconfusion or a kind of misinformation campaign which has been running day in and day out, that this ethanol is leading to the wastage of the engines, the insurance companies are not going to cover it, so on and so forth. What is the reality of it? Now, the government, in a clarification, has issued that basically this ethanol mixture is not going to impact overall the health of the vehicle. And that is where basically one has to understand that when we talk about this ethanol, it has only been implemented after subsequent amount of tests for 40,000 kilometers, which has been done by the Automobile Association of India. And that is the clarification that the government has issued. But then, is there an impact on mileage? Is it the case that the mileage will reduce? The answer is yes. The E20 blended petrol mixture will definitely reduce the amount of mileage that your vehicle provides, particularly those vehicles which have been manufactured prior to 2023. That is where you will definitely find that the mileage has been reduced. To what extent and why is it that the mileage is reducing? That is because the energy content, if you compare it, then petroleum has got the energy content of 34 megajoule per liter and ethanol has 21 megajoule per liter. So, result, ethanol has 38% less energy per liter as compared to petroleum. Now, overall, in the case, and this is a comparative scale that you will observe when we talk about, let's suppose, E5. In the case of E5, you have 2 to 3% lower mileage in the vehicles as compared to a pure petroleum mix. And when you go on to E20, that is almost 6 to 8% lower. Then why is it that the government is promoting it if it has got lower mileage? The answer is simple. Ethanol has got a substantially higher amount of octane number. And listen to this carefully. What is octane number? Octane number gives you an efficiency at which any fuel mixture will burn in the combustion chamber. Now, a higher octane number means that ethanol will provide a greater acceleration to the vehicle in the short run. And that is very beneficial when it comes to the city traffic. And that is where the government is saying that, particularly the cities which are cramped for traffic jams and so on, there it can provide short term boost to the vehicles and short term benefits to the vehicles. Now, ethanol has lower energy content per liter as compared to petroleum. Engine needs more fuel to produce the same power. So vehicle travels lesser distance. And this is the nutshell of it. But is it the case that it is being implemented only in India? Is the case of ethanol blending carried out only in India, or has it been carried across the world? So the reality of it is that it has been carried successfully in multiple different parts of the planet. So if you take the case of Brazil, I told you the example of Brazil because, like India, it is also one of the major agricultural output nations. Brazil uses E27 to E30. That means 30% to 27% of ethanol, depending upon one region to another. And ethanol is produced by fermentation of sugarcane. What about US? US, after all, has got substantial amount of petroleum reserves, shale oil, etc. Now, in that, E10, that is 10% blending, is available nationwide, and E15 and E85 is also available for certain vehicles which are compatible to that fuel. And in that particular case, maize is used for the process of fermentation. Then Thailand. Thailand has got a very prominent, for at least a couple of decades, a prominent biofuel policy. And Thailand has been using E20 and E85. Thereby, again, the case of cassava, the case of the byproducts of sugarcane, that is molasses, etc., are also used. Canada, again E10. European Union, E5 and E10. And India is targeting E20. And India is targeting that. Why? India has made a climate commitment of net zero by 2070, which means India has to reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that it is carrying out. So that is where it is very important for India to actually reduce the burning of fossil fuels. And that is where ethanol comes at a substitute. Now, how is that ethanol produced, by the way? It is not simply the case where sugarcane is taken, ethanol is extracted, it is put in your fuel tank. It is a long drawn process. Before we'll take a look into that, an important announcement for all of you. All those of you preparing for civil services examination, now is the time to compare yourself with the best across the country. And for that, we at Unacademy are bringing for you the UCSC, that is Unacademy Civil Services Championship Test, where you do get curated questions, attempt those questions, and you stand a chance to win very lucrative prizes. It is at this point of time where you can test yourself and understand the lacunae in your preparation and improve your preparation thereby. So, mark the date, 12th of July, time 11 a.m. or 5 p.m. The link will be provided in the description below. Now, having said that, what is the process of production of ethanol? Now, if you take a look at it, first of all, the feedstock is prepared, and that feedstock can be any starch based product: sugarcane, corn, excess rice, as is the case with India, cassava, etc. Now, from that feedstock, fermentation is carried out, whereby microorganisms like yeast or bacteria, they consume the sugar in the feedstock and then convert them into biofuel, such as ethanol or methane. After that, distillation is done. Now, this distillation process is done to separate the biofuel from water and other impurities. So, all this misinformation regarding the fact that ethanol blending has provided some kind of a mixture due to which ants are there in the fuel tank, etc., that stands highly misplaced. Then, after that, purification of the entire distilled mixture is done. Then it is blended in the required amount and then given to the OMCs or the oil marketing companies. Now, when we talk about biofuel, it is also important from the examination point of view to understand that biofuel is not a monolith. You have different generations and different types of biofuel. Based upon how that biofuel is produced, the process of production, the input material, you have the classification into four generations. You have the first generation biofuel, that is from the edible biomass. So, in simple terms, the present day ethanol production that you see, it is the first generation biofuel that we are producing. It is being produced from corn, sugar, wheat, rice bran, and so on. Now, it has got its advantages. It is easier to produce ethanol by this process. But the disadvantages also. For example, let's suppose you are utilizing rice or sugarcane to produce ethanol. Now you are also depleting substantial amount of groundwater in order to produce that rice. For example, in India, we already have the case of unsustainable agriculture being carried out in the region of Punjab, Haryana, and Western UP, whereby you see that those areas which are not fit or suitable for growing paddy, they receive so little amount of rainfall, but they end up exploiting, and for that matter, over exploiting the groundwater reserves just to support the paddy crop. So there is that risk or the issue of overexploitation of your natural resource, that is your groundwater. Other than that, if let's suppose you keep on utilizing your sugarcane and rice and maize, there is that larger question of food security, which also looms and which is present. So that food security question also needs to be addressed. Then you have the second generation biofuel, which has got the advantage that it is manufactured from the non edible biomass. That is the waste materials, the straw, the grass, wood, etc., bamboo shoots, etc. Then you have the third generation, which is in a way much more eco friendly, that is produced by micro and macro algae. So these microbes are specially cultured or cultivated in order to use them for fermentation and ethanol production later on. And the highest grade of it all is your fourth generation, where chemical processing through solar fuels, genetic algae, gasification, and pyrolysis that is used in order to produce ethanol. This is a carbon negative process, which means what? That when you carry out, let's suppose, gasification or the utilization of the genetic algae, you are also carrying out carbon sequestration. In the remaining three of them, you will find that in the production process, you are also generating greenhouse gas, that is carbon dioxide and methane. In the first two, the production of methane is much higher. In third, it is slightly carbon neutral. But fourth is the most beneficial. But for that, you need technological prowess. You also need substantial amount of capital investment in the equipments, and scientific know-how in the form of research and development is also required. Here in front of you, you will find the entire list of the first generation, second generation, third generation, and the fourth generation, about the pros and the cons of each of them, and overall how that is produced. Now, after that, the government initiatives. As I already informed you, that government has been trying to inculcate this blending program in order to reduce our fossil fuel dependence since the early 2000s. However, in the past decade, you'll find that this program has been accelerated with two important policy measures. One is the National Policy on Biofuels, that was introduced around 2018, and then the PM Jivan mission, which was introduced in 2019. Both of them to augment the amount of biofuel production and for greater adoption of biofuel. By the way, along with this, you have another government initiative, that is Satat initiative. Satat initiative is for sustainable alternatives of the fossil fuel mixture that we are using, but it generally is revolving around the compressed biogas. So we are not considering biogas in this. We are simply considering those government programs and initiatives which are targeted towards ethanol blending. Now, when we talk about the national biofuel policy, so the aim was to provide additional income to the farmers. I told you how this will also have the potential to augment the rural economy and the rural income. Infrastructure investment in rural areas through setting up of the 2G biorefineries, second generation. We are still producing ethanol through first generation. Environmentally friendly fuel for cleaner environment, then reduce import dependency of crude, health benefit through utilization of used cooking oil, which can also be used as a feedstock, and so on, and eventually leading to employment generation in the entire value chain as well. Then when we talk about the Jivan, so that is basically Jaiv Indhan Vatavaran Anukul Fasal Avdesh Nivaran. Now, what is it about? So, financial support to integrate bioethanol projects using crop residues and biomass, 12 commercial scale and 10 demonstration scale second generation ethanol projects to be provided with the viability gap funding from the side of the government, enhance farmer income, and a budgetary outlay. Now, this has been amended and this has now been extended till 2028 2029. And along with that, financial support to advanced biofuel projects using biomass and other renewable feedstock. So, this is in a nutshell everything that you need to know when it comes to ethanol and ethanol blending. A very quick recap in 45 seconds about everything that you need to know. First of all, what is ethanol blending? That is what we have seen. Along with that, we have seen what is the case of E5, E10, and E20, since when it was launched. So, it was launched in the initial part of the early 2000s. Then, after that, we have also seen the global cases, why it is being followed in various parts of the globe, which are the global leaders. Brazil, Thailand are the global leaders. European Union, E5 to E15. US, even E85 is available for the compatible vehicles. Does the mileage reduce? Yes. Why? Because overall, the energy quotient of ethanol is less. However, when it comes to the octane number of ethanol is higher as compared to petroleum. So the initial acceleration provided to the vehicles can be higher. Then the process of production of ethanol. First of all, you have the feedstock preparation. After that, fermentation, whereby the microbes they work on the sugars which are present. After that, distillation, where the impurities are separated. Then purification, then blending, and then distribution. After that, we have taken a look at the generations of biofuel, where we have seen the first generation from feedstock, second generation non edible biomass, third generation from microalgae, fourth generation from genetically modified microorganisms, and then what are the government initiatives. So, if you have understood this particular content, that is more than sufficient for the requirement of prelims as well as the mains examination. I hope this video has been helpful. If you have liked the video, please don't forget to click on the like, share, and the subscribe button. Put that in the comment section. Until we meet again, do take care of yourself. Goodbye and thank you.